Kyle here from All Media Reviews, here to continue on with the albums of the year series 1976. Been trying to catch up a little bit, and 76. I'll say this about 76. It's a great year, but for my taste, there's just a lot of jazz fusion. I mean, that was kind of all for people that love jazz. Jazz fusion was all the rage. There's just so much of it. It's almost like there's too much of it. I'll fully admit that. So anyway, may as well get into it because I got 32 albums to talk about. Try to get through this as fast as possible. The collage here, of course. So number 32. It's kind of a meme, novelty item. This Ken by request only, which was popular on Rate Your Music. The guy looks like Steve Zahn. Of course, Steve Zahn was not that old back in 1976, but kind of to do with sort of not evangelical stuff. It's like contemporary Christian, but not really. But yeah, I mean, it's novelty. I know it more for just the reputation it got on Rate Your Music than anything else, but I had to have it on the list. All right, so number 31, I have first of a number of compact discs, except for I don't have, of course, I'm still missing the CD and the booklet. Jean-Luc Ponty's Aurora, which Jean-Luc Ponty, I enjoy his work with Mahavishnu Orchestra and with Frank Zappa at points. What was that song he did? Was it King Kong, I think? His solo work seems to be more quantity over quality. I liked him when we collaborated, but I mean, I don't mind anything I've ever heard from him, but I've never been blown away. Aurora, what's the prime Jean-Luc Ponty? He's a little bit like Steve Hackett in that sense, although I love Steve Hackett's first album I did talked about in '75. But anyway, this is one of his more well-known solo albums, Aurora, and I haven't listened to it in a long time. Let's see here. Number 30. Now this might seem a little excessively low for this record, but I'll be honest, I think I spent more time listening, like hearing about it, than actually spent time listening to it. I did buy it. As much as I love Pat Metheny. And Jaco's on this. I have this low because I find this album to be I struggle with it. I find it to be somewhat boring. It's more free jazz. Bright Size Life, the debut album from Pat Metheny, which does include Jaco Pastorius. One of 3 records from Jaco Pastorius we see on this list, and then drummer Bob Moses. But, he would go to great heights, Pat Metheny, that followed this. I love him when he's really good, but some of his music just loses me in that I just don't get engaged. I'm not repulsed by it, I just did not engage by it, and unfortunately Bright Size Life, I don't even know how much I paid for this. I paid $3.60. But anyway, I know people love this. I think this is Windham Hill, or ECM. It's a classic by some people's standard debut album from Pat Metheny, but it's just never a record I've loved, so that's why it finishes this low. In a year with a lot of great jazz fusion. And it's free jazz, so. Number 29, Camel's Mood Madness. I don't have that album, but I know among the Camel, catalog, it's after Mirage. It's considered by some their well known. I think Mood Madness might be the one I listened to it years ago. That's all instrumental. I could be wrong. One of the albums in the mid '70s was all instrumental. No, okay, it must have been the one before, the Snow Goose. Anyway, again, because I haven't listened to it that much, I just had it. I know I've listened to it, but again, it could have been 15 years ago the last time I listened to it, so that's why it's this low. Number 28, an album that I thankfully just recovered, which, I could be bumping this up a little bit. This is splitting hair somewhat. The debut album, I believe, from the American, I think they're from Chicago, but America's answer to Yes in some ways, Starcastle. Lady of the Lake is that 10-minute, half-minute song I've always liked. I mean, I told that story before, at least once before, and many times in the blog, I think. When I saw Dream Theater with ELP and Deep Purple, one of the people that had never heard Dream Theater thought they reminded them of Starcastle. Gary Strader was at Nearfest. I know they had like a guitar for him. They did the whole thing when he was dealing with, I think it was like cancer or something like that. But I like Starcastle. Unlike some people, I still can't really get past the fact how similar they sound to Yes. But unlike some of the copycat bands of the last 25, 30 years, I still enjoy their music enough. It doesn't really matter that much. So yeah, it's a good debut album. What is it? The the 7.5-minute song Sunfield and Forces. It's very happy, very trippy. It's like, it's almost like the Yes album. Very that Yes album sound, like the Tony K Yes in some ways, but doing stuff a little more proggy. Anyway, Star Castle, that's number 28. That's the debut album from Star Castle. I think it's the debut. The self-titled. Number 27. So here we get into jazz fusion of a different kind. The Shakti album with John McLaughlin and Zakir Hussain, I believe. And while I do really enjoy this, it's just 3 pieces. It's really, I don't want to call it completely purely improvised, but he's got 2 other guys on here. There's the picture. I like this. I think it, when you're watching it live, it probably is more engaging, but I know it doesn't, like, is Zakir saying on this? Maybe I'm wrong about it. Yeah, he is. He plays the tablas, but L. Shankar, R. Raghavan, but these Indian musicians, and T.S. Vinayakaram, but it's got the jam. I know watching it, I watched a video years ago and I was just blown away by it. I think it's the 3rd piece, which is just a long mouthful. It's like Muse No More Stories. What need have I for this? What need I have for that? I am dancing at the feet, I'm thinking of Joy. That's 29 minutes, but Joy is 18 minutes. If I really want to just kind of trip out, here's some kind of uplifting, kind of soothing, escapist music. Shakti is among the best kind of thing for that. And it's John McLaughlin. In some ways, I think he did some of his most interesting stuff when he was doing this stuff, even though, again, it was, it wasn't jazz fusion exactly. It was him playing with sitars and violins and tablas and stuff like that. So anyway. And Zakir, I've known Zakir Hussain, seen him many times live. It was like one of the first times that a lot of people got introduced to him. He was pretty young then, in the mid-70s. So, all right, number 70. That's number 27. Number 26. So an album that I do not. Oh yes, I do have. Let's see, there's 3 appearances. The Jaco Pastorius self-titled album, Jaco Pastorius, which features Herbie Hancock, and I think Pat Metheny. Well, Pat Metheny doesn't show up on here. Wayne Shorter. It's a lot of the Lenny White. A lot of the Weather Report guys are on here, and he would also join Weather Report not that long before this came out. It played with them live before they recorded, but and while I haven't listened to this a ton, I do enjoy it. I like it more than Bright Size Left, despite the fact that Jaco played on Pat Metheny's debut album, Pat Metheny Group's debut album. But Come On, Come Over, Kuru, Speak Like a Child is really great. The groove on that is just, the flow is great. Used to Be a Cha-Cha, the ending's great. Okan Kole y Trompa. Yeah, those are my favorites. Good album, kind of Weather Report like, kind of Return to Forever like early. There's a lot of flute on this album, like Return to Forever like the early Return to Forever, not the Return to Forever of that period. But anyway, so that's number 26, I believe. So moving on, number 20. That was 26. So yes, all right. Number 25. Now this is low for some people. The first of a couple Genesis albums that came out in 1976. Wind and Wuthering, which 11th Earl of Mars, the one that I think of this album most for. It sounds most like Trick of the Tail, a Trick of the Tail song, like they didn't get included or was not finished when Trick of the Tail was recorded. Afterglow's nice. Your Own Special Way is okay. One for the Vine. This is a more solemn, ethereal, soothing kind of textural album than probably any of the Genesis albums from the 70s, especially. I like it, but I've never been addicted to it. But I also have never disliked anything about it. I just kind of feel like they're going for a soft rock or yacht rock approach in some ways. But some of the pieces are kind of extended, so they retain some of the progginess. Of course, you have Steve Hackett still. This is the last proper studio album that Steve Hackett would play on. He would, of course, be on Spot the Pigeon and the live album Seconds Out. But anyway. So that was 25. 24, another Jaco Pastorius album. Now this is the Jaco, I'm putting it right here, I don't have a copy of it. The Jaco Pastorius album with Pat Metheny and these two other guys, which I think is live. I'm not certain of that, but I'm pretty sure when you talk about Pat Metheny and Jaco Pastorius working together, this is the one that people rave about the most. It's listed as Jaco Pastorius, Pat Metheny, Bruce Ditmas, and Paul Bley. That song Vampira is awesome. And this whole second side just flows so well. The groove, the energy is just fantastic. And Metheny he's not doing the trumpet tone because he wasn't doing that at that point, but he's jamming. His blends with Jaco's bass lines, his walking bass lines, just work so well on the second side of this album. Honestly, I have not listened to that much, but this is the one that, by reputation, I think most people think of when they say, "Oh, when Pat Metheny worked with Jaco Pastorius." Of course, he's on those other two records. He's on Bright Side's Life, but yeah, this is my among the three. I mean, I'm putting it that high, but among my favorite of the Jaco Pastorius works from outside of Weather Report from '76. He was really, they were really prolific, so. And again, I'm pretty sure it's live. I'm not certain of that. But anyway, I don't know if it's just called Jaco. Jaco or that long name. So number 23, all right, the first appearance of a couple from Led Zeppelin, Presence. While, oddly enough, this has my favorite Led Zeppelin track, Achilles' Last Stand. I think it's their most progressive track. It's the most progressive rock-like track. It's a showstopper. It's an all-time classic. The rest of this record is only so-so. I mean, I love the Zeppelin run. I don't consider this a bad record, but it pales. I like Nobody's Fault But Mine. Classic rock radios played that a lot. For Your Life. What is it? Candy Store Rock. There's a few other decent songs. Royal Orleans. T for One. None of those other songs really stand out dramatically like basically Achilles' Last Stand and Nobody's Fault by Mine to a second degree. But on the strength of, because Achilles' Last Stand is like 8 minutes or something like that, that song alone, it has to go in here. It has to go somewhere in the list, somewhat decent. So, Presence from Led Zeppelin. They followed Physical Graffiti with that. It's like the polar opposite in a lot of ways. But and of course, it was the follow-up to after that horrible experience Robert Plant had losing his son, I believe. Or his kid. I don't remember if it was a son or daughter. Anyway. Number 22, that was 23. Number 22, again, another Fusion record. Again, this is a list a year filled with Fusion. Stanley Clarke's School Days, his most well-known, probably solo record, which features, like, Billy Cobham, I believe, on a couple tracks, and a lot of the Fusion names I mean, having revisited this recently, yeah, it is a really good album, but it is definitely sort of derived. You can hear some of the stuff, the more funky Return to Forever stuff. It sounds like a solo album from ideas that didn't make the full band, I guess, in some ways. I don't know. Steve Gadd was the drummer on so I know they had different. He had George Duke on here. It's got a great roster, like most of these Fusion albums from the '70s. And Stanley Clarke is a fantastic bass player. And you compare this to his other Fusion albums, his other solo albums rather. It still stands out. I mean, the title track alone, the opening title track, the dancer, what is it? The string arrangements on, I think it's, oh no, that's just the middle section. But it's kind of less is more. It's only like 30 minutes. Life is Just a Game. That's the other one that kind of stands, the closing track. Anyway, School Days from Stanley Clarke. At number 22. Number 21, all right, here's a bunch of records I don't have physical copies of, unfortunately. ELO's New World Record, which I really like that, the mid-70s ELO, that's like they were going one step. They went from, on to, Into the Blue. Yeah, I got my playlist on here, of course. I was going to make this video, unfortunately, last week, and I was just kind of going through some stuff, and then, New World Record. Yeah, I mean, Tightrope, Telephone Line's a song that, they've been playing a lot on the oldies channels now. Rockaria is great. Living Thing is another favorite of mine on this record. So ELO, A New World Record at number 21. Okay, now Steely Dan, number 20. I think, let's see, I had that, which is the album that features Kid Charlemagne and, Steely Dan, like ELO, like some of the other bands I've been listening to a lot that were in the mid-70s. I'm familiar, but not super familiar, but I know a lot of their individual songs. The Caves of Adamira, Don't Take Me Alive, and the title track are among my favorites on this record. I mean, the production's great again. I was doing some research. Jeff Porcaro's not on this album, but he's on the previous one. But Michael McDonald had showed up, because of course they followed this album with their classic Asia, which, you know, we'll see where that falls in 77 for me, but or goes. So The Royal Scam from Steely Dan, another terrific record from them in the mid-70s, number 20. Number 19, Black Market, the final Weather Report related, Jaco related release of this list. I'll just, not to spoil too much, there's not too much more I can think of. But yeah, I mean, the title track is great. You know, Jaco on his solo album played, was it Portrait of Tracy? That album was actually on there. But, you know, this is the first album, I believe, that Jaco was on with Weather Report, but looking at the credits, actually, he's only on about half of it. Half of it has Alfonso Johnson. But Gibraltar and Hirandu, those are my other kind of favorites on this record. But yeah, they do a live version of Portrait of Tracy on like the remastered version. But it's, you know, not my favorite Weather Report, but Weather Report, it's like, I feel like they really stand out more live, but their studio albums are just kind of like, yes, I love this, but then you kind of get lost in some of their tracks. I mean, they had some other records. The one that followed it, I actually have I had a copy on CD, and so the Jewel Case, which has their most well-known song, Birdland. You know, Night Passage. You know, the Jaco period was their most famous period, but of course, Alfonso Johnson was their bass player, and then they had Victor Bailey later. But anyway, Weather Report, I mean, among the fusion acts, they're kind of third or fourth, but I mean, when they're good, they are really good. It's just they're not as consistent to me as some of the other ones. But anyway. So moving up, number 18, that was number 19. Number 18, Led Zeppelin's live album, first of a few, or maybe the second of a few live albums on The Song Remains the Same, the famous like concert film, and then they released the double live album, which includes, most notably, probably the Dazed Confused, which is like, I think it's like 32 minutes. Celebration Day, No Quarters, great on this, of course. I mean, these are really long jams. A lot of them are jams. You know, it's got Stairway to Heaven, of course. This is kind of the peak of Zeppelin, sort of. I think it was a couple years before that they recorded this, but it came out in 76. But, yeah, because they didn't feature anything from Physical Graffiti or Presence on this. I think this may have come out before Presence. And even Houses of the Holy, I don't think. Other than Rain Song. It's got Rain Song and Song Remains the Same, which I love, of course. But anyway. Moby Dick, Whole Lot of Love. Yeah, it's a classic. I mean, I grew up in high school and listening to this. My friend was dreading having to watch a 32-minute Dazed Confused. It's a mood album. If I want to listen to some Led Zeppelin, I might listen to that. I might listen to How the West Is Won. I don't know. Anyway, that's number, what is it, 19? Oh, yeah, 19? That's number 18, rather. So number 17, another album I don't have a physical copy of, How Dare You from 10cc, which is the one that followed maybe the most well-known album, but the original soundtrack. I really like this album. You know, I've only listened to it a few times, but it's an album I want to buy for sure on vinyl. Let's see, what's the track that actually references the title track? It's got the picture of the woman and the guy on the phone. I want to say, yeah, rock and roll. Don't Hang Up. Yeah, but. The biggest highlight for me on this, though, this is an absolute banger, is I'm Mandy, Fly Me. That song is trippy and totally uplifting. Oh, I mean, it goes back to the whole thing with 10cc. I've noticed that when they're really good, I just totally eat them up. That they remind me of Jellyfish, you know. But the title track, Lazy Ways, Iceberg, Rock and Roll Lullaby, I think this is pretty low for it. If I could spend more time with this down the road, I'll do a 2.0 maybe or something like that. This could easily be in the top 10. So anyway, that's number 17. Number 16, an album I have, but I have not listened to in long. I was revisiting some of it last week. The Alan Parsons Project's Tales of Mystery and Imagination. And I know there's Edgar Allan Poe on here, but the 15-minute suite, The Fall of the House of Usher, is really where you get your money on this thing. But it's Alan Parsons before he went totally pop. I can't remember who the singer is, because Alan Parsons doesn't do the vocals on this. Looking here, there's a bunch of different singers. Arthur Brown. I mean, he does do some, but they're, he's always had good singers, but they're just like sort of singers that never really got known for anything else that I'm aware of, at least. But yeah, it's a classic prog album. I mean, it's maybe his most progressive album actually in some ways. Telltale Heart on the first side, A Dream Within a Dream, that like whispering and stuff like that, and little sound effects. Yeah, it's an album I like. I've never been obsessed with, but I mean, if I'm going to an Alan Parsons, it would be one of a couple records I would choose. So even though he had bigger hits with some of his other records, of course, like Games People Play and Eye in the Sky. So later, number 15, Rainbow Rising. Well, it features, of course, one just absolute banger, just staple song in terms of hard rock and prog. The song that why am I spacing on the title? I don't have it. I need to get this Rainbow, especially when Johnny James Dio passed away. I went and just had to check out Rainbow more fully. But I mean, it's their second album, I believe. And of course I did a review of the Dio documentary, and they talked about Rising especially. They talked about his time with Rainbow and then Sabbath later, but I didn't even listen to it. Stargazer. Why am I? But A Light in the Black is another one. This is why, because it's a remix version I'm looking at here. But yeah, Stargazer's. But I mean, the rest of the record's really good because mainly I would say because Ronnie James Dio is such a great singer. Tarot Woman, Run with the Wolf, Starstruck. He's such an epic singer, and he's got such a great vibrato, Ronnie James Dio, that this is probably a little low, but I mean, it talks about the strength of this year, the mid-'70s, most of the '70s years. Most. I'm not going to say all the '70s years. Most of the '70s years had just a lot of depth. So anyway, that's number 15. Number 14, an album that was a little bit lower just until a few days ago. I revisiting this. I've talked about it in my A to Z, Vinyl A to Z. Queen's A Day at the Races, the album that followed up A Night at the Opera, which in some ways seems like a monumental task, although Night at the Opera wasn't as massive until like Wayne's World in the '90s. In the last couple decades, but it's not anywhere in the same category as A Night at the Opera, but it's still really good. I would say Millionaire Waltz is an absolute banger. Tie Your Mother Down. Everyone knows Somebody to Love, which I think of that song as much for, and it's kind of like a bluesy ballad, like a almost not like Elvis, but That song has like a retro feel to it, but I mean, I think of George Michael's version more than in probably anything else than the Queen version in some ways. You and I, White Man. Yeah, the production's really good on this. They probably spent more money on the production on this than they did A Night at the Opera, actually. So, yeah, I mean, I guess we're going to be talking about the Queen discography with Death by Unicorn probably sometime in the next few months. And this album will definitely be put in a different spot than it would have been a month ago or a couple years ago for sure. Because I know it's a fair. It's named after the Marx Brothers movie, just like A Night at the Opera, of course. I always think so, at least. So that's number, was it 14? Making my way through this list. That was 14, yeah. So 13. Well, this is an absolute classic, which, a lot of people probably have in their top 10, even if they're not prog heads. Boston's debut album, which I listened to this a ton because I listened to KQRS, the home of rock and roll classic rock station in Minnesota. They played the whole bloody thing, of course, constantly. And, the songs held up. I never got totally burnt out on it, unlike Black Dog and Rock and Roll from Zeppelin. Yeah, this is my original CD, you can see. One of the first issues, it'd be a first issue or first pressing of a CD. I mean, if I'm going for my go-tos, Foreplay Long Time is the proggiest thing on here. I've always loved Hitch a Ride and Peace of Mind. More Than a Feeling I've heard so many times, it's been referenced. It still holds up. The harmonies are great. Production's pristine on this. Something About You's great. It's not an absolute perfect record, but it's a flawless record, you could say. There's no songs I would skip if I'm going to listen to it. Anyway, Boston's debut album. At number 13. Number 12. An album that I embarrassingly do not have on vinyl yet. It's on my one of the big holes in my collection. Rush's First live album, All the World's a Stage, which people love this album, and I always liked it. I remember the thing that's noteworthy was I bought this when I was in high school, not this version, but the original version I got. It had a Miles Davis album, like Kind of Blue on it. The track numbers were weird. It said Rush's All the World's a Stage, so I returned it to the store and everything. They gave me a new one. I should have kept it for novelty's sake, really. It doesn't have the complete 2112. Of course, that was notable when they did different stages in the mid-90s, and they did the tour. They included the Dream section, which is my favorite section, Oracle the Dream. But, yeah, I mean, 2112, if By Tour and the Snow Dog, Anthem, Something for Nothing, Lakeside Park. I mean, it sounds great. The crowd sounds great. It's mixed well. And it really captures that early period of Rush well. Well, the period, after Neil joined, really. Of course, the early period, they didn't have any albums from the early 70s or whatever, late 60s, early 70s. So let's see, number 12. Number 11, another album I don't have on vinyl, but I have on CD at least. Styx's Crystal Ball. My favorites on this, well, there's nothing quite as good as Sweet Man in Blue. The Claire de Lune Ballerina Suite, that 7-minute, has always been great. It's very delicate. I think of Kevin Gilbert's song Air Dance when I hear that, or vice versa. Title track was a hit, Mademoiselle. This is the first album, of course, with Tommy Shaw. So his vocals and his songwriting got brought in. I think he wrote the title track. Yeah, he did. And he co-wrote Mademoiselle is catchy as hell. That song's a pop gem. I don't know why more people don't talk about that when we talk about Styx. But Jennifer's another one I've always liked. I mean, this album is one of their best, most consistent albums. Even though I like the early Styx in some ways, they were more consistent, I think, with their mid-70s output. But anyway, Crystal Ball, number 11. All right, now to the top 10. We have A Trick of the Tail from Genesis, the second Genesis album, of the first, obviously, after Peter Gabriel left. I mean, it's a great record, even though I don't find it to be as ambitious. I saw someone make a comment, I think on Scott, the Prog Corner, they talked about Genesis a couple weeks ago, saying that it reminds them more of something they would have written right after Selling England or around. Yeah, and I agree with that. It's almost like Selling England Part 2 with Phil in some ways. But I also think of Wind in the Willows for some reason. Oh, that's Wind and Wuthering, but like that little frog story. I always associate this with that. Like, I don't know, something like artwork or something like that. But, Dance on a Volcano, Entangled, Squonk, those, every track, the title track, Los Angeles is a Steve Hackett featured piece, of course. Robbery, Assault and Battery is not bad even. I like this, but to me, after Gabriel left, there was just a clear-cut difference sort of in the aesthetic. So I've never appreciated the post-Gabriel albums quite as much, but I still really like them. But I'll get to some of the ones that come after this later, of course. So that's number 10. Number 9, that was number 9, rather. Number 8, another live album. I got a bunch of live albums still left. I guess this is kind of sacrilege. My favorite album artwork ever, and one of my go-to live albums ever, the Billy Cobham, George Duke band live on tour in Europe. I guess, it got signed by George Duke and everything like that, and Billy Cobham. I think I showed this in the vinyl A to Z. All Mustafa, The Beloved, Frankenstein Goes to the Disco, Juicy. I love the fact these are all like original pieces, and I don't know if they ever really recorded. I've never done the research of George or Billy ever really releasing this stuff in the studio, but I think there's a really cool improvisation or theatrical element to this live album. That's what makes it so great. Also has John Scofield and Alfonso Johnson. And this must have been at once Jaco had joined. I don't know. Or he just had joined them on tour, so, because I think Cobham and Duke are on Jaco's album, or maybe what Black Market, Alfonso is, of course, but on some of it, as I mentioned earlier. So, all right, that's number 8. Number 7, it's like kind of like weird. It's like, well, the best live album. That's I consider that my favorite live album. In some ways, my favorite artwork because it's so whacked out. I'll show it again. Everyone's seen it, but the severed heads on the hands. Disembodied heads. Live at Carnegie, Renaissance Live at Carnegie Hall, an absolute barn burner of a live album. They do all of the Scheherazade piece, the 28 minutes on side C, and Ashes Are Burning, which is 23 minutes. And then the first side A and B, you do have, Prologue, Ocean Gypsy, Can You Understand, Carpet of the Sun, Running Hard, Mother. You don't have Trip to the Fair, unfortunately, but But some of these songs were on those original Renaissance compilations I got too, which is, this has always had a soft spot to me. So between those two epics on the second disc on C and D, and the second vinyl, and the stuff that I was familiar with from those compilations, this has always meant a lot to me, this album. Not to mention the fact that performances are fantastic, and it's very live at Carnegie Hall, all place, very prestigious. Which, you know, for Renaissance music, it made sense. All right, so number 6, you know, their whole influence between Sherazade and Tchaikovsky. You know, I wonder if some of the people that had tickets to go see the opera at Carnegie Hall went to say, oh, they're doing some Tchaikovsky, or the write-up would say Tchaikovsky or, you know, Sherazade inspired, because the album's named after Sherazade. Number 6, El Di Meola, Land of the Midnight Sun, his debut solo album, which, you know, this includes the title track, which is 9 minutes. If I'm not mistaken, yeah. The Golden Dawn Suite from Ocean to the Clouds. You know, I mean, he was just a maestro, and just a frenetic, just shredder who could do these licks. And, you know, while he was doing a lot of it in Return to Forever, he didn't get all his ideas out, so he had to do some of this stuff on his own. And he got, I'm pretty sure that a lot of the Fusion guys are on this, because there's keyboard. Stanley Clark, his RTF bandmate, Lenny White, is on it also, and Steve Gadd. Steve Gadd was one of the go-to drums, and Jaco's actually on the suite, on the Golden Dawn suite. So, yeah, I don't have this on vinyl yet, but yeah, I mean, his first 4 albums are just can't miss. If you like any of the jazz fusion stuff, they're essential. So, Land of the Midnight Sun probably is some of the most famous. I knew this guy named Al Wolovich from a local band. He ended up trying to play the Land of the Midnight Sun on 3 strings. He went to a cabin. If I'm not mistaken, he did that. Anyway, this is a tale from a friend of mine. I don't know if actually how accurate it is. Anyway, number 6, number 5, and top 5 finally. This epic video. Leftovers are from Kansas. You know, of course, features their most well-known song, Kira and Wayward Son, which, I've been burned on a little bit by that in my classic rock radio, and he's probably on Rock Band and stuff like that, and been on some soundtracks, but it's still decent, holds up. For a pop song, it's very progressive. The Wall is an all-time favorite of mine. Cheyenne Anthem, magnum opus isn't magnum opus. Miracles Out of Nowhere, it's a classic. I mean, again, the Kansas records you're splitting hair with in the mid to late 70s, but their probably most famous album. This is the most popular, because of Carry On Wayward Son. But anyway, that's number 5. Number 4, the debut album from John Anderson, Elias of Sun Hill. I've talked a lot about this, but this is fantastic, trippy. I mean, it is kind of Yes-like, and it's also not like Yes in a lot of ways. I mean, start naming off the track titles are just, it'll take me a minute just to pull them up because I don't know them by heart, of course. But it's he created his own world with this thing, and he played supposedly all the instruments. Flight of the Morglade, that's one of the go-tos. Sound of the Galleon, To the Runner. I mean, the whole thing flows super well. When I got this, I did not expect to like it nearly as much as I did. And I'm like, all these people that rave about this are right. I can't say that about any of his other records, solo records. Some of them are good or decent, but this thing stands out. I don't know what he did. He used different instruments. I know he had some influence from, I think it was Roger Dean? Or someone helped him in the production. But it says, all instruments performed by John Anderson. I'm thinking of the Rail NYC's documentary about Relay mentioned this. But anyway, yeah, Elias is a fantastic debut album, a fantastic album of any kind. And if I was going to one album from any of the Yes members solo, this is clearly my favorite. I love Fish Out of Water, but this is the most creative and the most ambitious, the most different. It's very much like a world-building thing, and we're going to maybe get the sequel at some point, I hope, but maybe next year. It was supposed to come this year, but maybe next year. Okay, so number 3, pretty much most people know, it just matter of the order. Rush's 2112. Everyone and their mother's Prague friend has talked about this to death, but The Suite, I talked about the live album, of course, All the World's a Stage. The Suite is fantastic. It does sync up with Willy Wonka and the Chocolate Factory. If you've never tried, you should try it. The song Tears, his mom is crying when that song comes on. Passes to Bangkok, Twilight Zone, Something for Nothing. I mean, it was the album that sort of, got the record label off their back, and it kind of saved their career. Is it their best record? No, it's up there, certainly, but they didn't even have any keyboards. To me, it's like Rush with keyboards, to me, is always better than Rush without keyboards. But, I mean, it's the first, like, you could say it's proto-prog metal on it. It's the most influential album on prog metal. Pretty easily, I would say. There's some others that were big, but this is probably the most influential album, even though it's not really prog metal, but it gets heavy enough, especially the overture and Temples of Syrinx. So, number 3. Number 2, actually everyone doesn't know all the last... I was wrong about that. Return to Forever's Romantic Warrior, all the other Fusion records, this one came on top for 76 for me. This is Return to Forever at the height of their powers. Every track, Medieval Overture, The Sorceress, The Romantic Warrior, title track, Majestic Dance, The Magician, Duel of the Jester, and the Tyrant. This is musicianship at its finest. The classic lineup, the most talented lineup probably in jazz fusion history. Chick Corea, Stanley Clarke, Lenny White, and Al Di Meola. And this is the third record with Al Di Meola, I believe. Yeah, I mean, this is as important to modern jazz music of the last whatever it's been, almost 50 years, as any album to me in jazz, in the history of the last 50 years of jazz, and of course jazz fusion especially. This is 1A, 1B, 1C for jazz fusion and jazz rock. And I mean, I don't listen to it that often, but I've never gotten sick of it. I've never felt that people beat it down my ears like close to the edge. It's just, I think it's properly rated and it's iconic. And it's sort of, and the production's a step up. I love it. So anyway, but number 1, another jazz fusion record of sorts. Before they were actually Brand X, the Brand X members, they followed up the Peter and the Wolf with a much more creative and original sort of soundtrack or, of sorts. An original story, Marscape. Jack Lancer and Robin Lumley, includes the services of Phil Collins, Percy Jones, John Goodsall. Why is this so good? It's sort of less is more. It's very creative. I think of the Martian Chronicles. I think of like space rock. There's like some chanty, but pretty much very little vocals. But it flows so well. It's only like 40 minutes long. There's different textures, very sad textures, very happy textures, very kind of melancholy, very kind of cinematic elements. It's an escapist album. I was blown away by this when my friend played the whole thing on KFA radio back in like 2001. It's like, what in the world is this? And I found that I love jazz fusion. My experience with Brian Max I never liked anything as much as this. And I just think that they just kind of hit a home run on this. It's sad that we've lost John Goodsall and maybe Robin Lumley in the last few years, unfortunately. But it says Philip Collins. But yeah, if you've never heard Marscape, you like jazz fusion, you like sort of soundtrackish like music, especially 70s, this is a no-brainer. I mean, people may love Brand X stuff better, but like Unorthodox Behavior, some of the other records that followed, if you've never heard this and you like Brand X, you're definitely sleeping on it. So anyways, so that's my list from 76. Again, thank you for anyone who's subscribed recently, but if you have not subscribed, please subscribe. Thank you for watching. Please give it a like and a comment and subscribe, and we'll see you next time. Sorry to add this on at the end of the video because I totally overlooked this and started counting wrong on the 1976 videos at the end here. I'm going to just add this on, but number 10 was not A Trick of the Tail from Genesis. That was number 9. Number 10 is Stevie Wonder's Songs in the Key of Life. And I did track down my wife's copy. This is not my copy, but, this is a double album. This is the peak or, the last of his sort of run of classic, Stevie Wonder records. It has just, because it's a double album, I saw him play the whole thing live back in 2015. It's sprawling and it runs the gamut of styles. I mean, there's a lot of pop, a lot of R&B and funk, and a lot of jazz fusion on this, actually. Ballads, that kind of thing. I mean, it's best known probably for songs like Isn't She Lovely and Sir Duke. It also has As. That's sort of been like a mantra or like a, an anthem for, gospel choirs and everything. It is very gospel-ish. There's just this version that she's got has extra stuff on it, but Contusion's a favorite of mine. I Wish, is it a perfect record? No, but I think if I'm going to one Stevie Wonder record, I would go, because it's a little like the Zeppelin Theory. It's a double album, and it has more depth and there's more meat on the bone compared to some of the other records. Even though the other records are very good beginning to end, there's just more to this record. That's the biggest. I think the production's a little better, and I can't remember who some of the guest musicians, but yeah, I mean, the jazz fusion's what, as the prog head, it's totally sold me on this record. But anyway, just to add to that, that's number 10, and my apologies, but I know why I messed this up, because I put my records together. I hadn't found this, and then I just was looking at the list, and I forgot, I didn't look at the number on the list. So, but anyway, thank you for watching. Please like, subscribe, and 1977 is coming up soon, and we'll see you next time.